Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Larry Gutman, retired teacher of business careers at Murry Bergtraum High School on the border of Brooklyn and Manhattan. Am I right?
Right across the bridge into Manhattan.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Larry, in reading the New York Times, I read a letter that you wrote to the editor about the school reform debate, of which there have been many letters and many articles. And in your letter, I was intrigued by the sentence that you say there's no mystery about quality education. Considering all the letters and all the press and all the conversations, I would say that if there's no mystery, please come forth with the answer.
Well, the answer is the kind of schools that people who have unlimited resources send their children to.
Okay, like private schools?
Private schools. I taught in a private school for 2 years.
Okay.
We had small classes. We had a lot of individualized attention. Students who were having problems were singled out, were helped. So everybody.
Okay, so you're talking. So you're really talking maybe about kids whose parents have choice because of their checkbook.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And suburban schools. Some suburban schools.
Some suburban schools are excellent.
So it's choice by checkbook or by zip code.
Well,
to some extent.
Yes. Well, what I'm saying is that if a person can send his child to any school, and it doesn't matter what it will cost, they know what they're looking for. They're looking for a school with small classes, with a lot of enrichment, with many professionals around to help.
Remediation is needed.
It's not a mystery.
And enrichment.
Yes.
Okay. So we've named now you've named in your letter small classes, a high ratio of staff to student. I'm reading directly from here. Enrichment and remediation. But all that stuff costs a lot of money, Larry. And some people pay $50,000 a year to get that. What about those folks who send their children to the constitutionally guaranteed public education? How are they going to get it? That's
the dilemma. That's the problem. And that's why politicians and people, administrators in public education, keep coming up with new programs and new buzzwords because they want to make it seem like there's something happening when they can't do the basics because they don't have the resources.
Larry, there was a time in this country, not that many years ago, when America was #1 in reading and math and science and those things that we value, as opposed to 16th in this and 32nd in that and blah, blah. There was a time when most folks sent their kids to public school with a high degree of confidence. What happened?
The problems, the social problems became great.
This is true.
And the resources for keeping up with those social problems haven't been there.
Right. So, but is it all just about money? Is it only about money?
Well, if you can build the kind of schools that wealthy people send their children to, with small classes, enrichment, like I said in the letter, a high ratio of adults to children.
Right.
If you can build those schools without spending a lot of money.
That's the point. But, you know, if it's only a matter of money, we spend more on education than we spend on defense. We spend more on education than many countries who are ahead of us in the statistics. This used to be a rich country. If it were only a matter of money, we could wave a magic wand and just give more money. But it doesn't appear so far that there is a relationship in the public school system between money spent and product produced.
Well, what is the money being spent on? That's the question.
And let me ask you something. To what degree does teacher performance matter?
Teacher performance matters, and good teachers are an important ingredient. But the one factor that always correlates with better performance of students in scientific studies is smaller class size.
And there has been some discussion about that, but there's no discussion. There's no reason. But if it, so that and that's something that is something that still this country we've tried and have not really produced good results. Is there anything? Is there any ingredient in a classroom that's any more important than the teacher?
No.
The teacher is the most.
The teacher is most important.
Okay.
But if you have a class with 35 students, as opposed to a class of 15 students, there's a big difference.
Yes.
Especially in the lower grades.
Right.
And especially in areas with many social problems.
Right. So
Especially
in
if you
in
take
my,
if you take an inner city public elementary school and you throw a teacher into a class of 35 students where all of those students are in poverty situations, where they have working parents who aren't home for them, where they don't have enrichment, where they don't have books in the house, and you expect a teacher to bring those 35 students to the same level as the suburban districts or the elite schools, it's impossible. It's just impossible. And it sets off a vicious cycle which continues through all the grades. We used to talk about this in my school, and we used to say, start at the elementary grades, take the first grade, and lower the class size drastically of that population. And then for the next year, go to 2 grades, and then 3 grades, and gradually bring the whole student population to where everybody is in small classes with enrichment. Start at the bottom and bring it up.
did that ever get accomplished in your school?
Of course not. It's too drastic, it's too logical, and it costs too much.
But there is a great deal of private investor money going into the public school education system right now. Why doesn't that just be tried?
Well, we had, in my school, we had programs where the corporations came in, and it did a lot of good. We had students on internships.
You taught business careers.
Yeah, our high school specialized in business careers.
Right.
And we had very good results from that. But there was a lot of failure in the freshman and sophomore classes because the classes were small and the students had trouble adjusting. And
they were used to a bigger environment.
They were they were not used to high school level work.
Right.
And we had a very good staff of teachers, and you know, the teachers demanded high school level work, and it was a difficult transition for these students. Yeah. So the ones who made it through went out into the corporate world and did very well, but there was a lot of dropping out.
Yeah. Well, getting back to your comment that you made about the quality of education. There's a lot of talk, and teachers, there's a great deal of press and talk about teacher performance based on student performance and some kind of a performance-based pay. You're smiling.
Well, that's another one of these new buzzwords. You know, every year there's a buzzword. It's a buzzword. The buzzwords are substitutes for real reform, for real attention to the problems of the students. I mean,
should teachers be incentivized to produce a better product?
Well, what are the criterion? If you can give me criteria,
test scores.
Well, I don't know.
Is that acceptable?
Test scores with other things, not just test scores.
Okay. What other things?
Well, there has to be some peer evaluation, administrative evaluation, parental evaluation of students' progress. It's not just test scores. If you only teach for tests, you're losing a lot.
You're certainly losing that whole enrichment quality that we're talking about.
Yes.
And maybe you're losing some remediation too.
Yes. Now, our school was a big school, and in New York City, many of the big schools have been closed down. But the big schools offer things that the small schools can't.
Right.
All the enrichment, all the clubs, all the after-school activities. That's very hard in a small school of a few hundred students. Now, if you have a school of 3,000, like we had, it's the argument is made that the student gets lost in a school of 3,000. So that's why Mayor Bloomberg and Chancellor Klein closed down many of the big schools. But why can't you have small classes and individualized attention within the big school?
Is that what you had when you were teaching there?
In the best years, yes.
Okay.
That's what we tried to have.
So your school, more or less, was sort of a model, sort of proved what you're talking about now. You had the environment of a large school, but you had small classes within it, but the diversity of options was much greater.
Yes, it was. It was. But we still had problems academically with the students coming in.
Nothing erases all academic problems.
And we were
Larry.
always fighting. I was on the school leadership team for 10 years.
What's the teachers?
Well, that was
Corps of teachers?
That was a committee of parents, students, teachers, administrators who were convened to handle problems in a sort of an informal way. It wasn't the teachers union chapter.
It wasn't union. You
No,
were a lobbyist for the student. You were an
Right.
advocate for the student.
The students and the parents.
Not for the union.
And we sort of, whatever problems came up that were not covered by the union contract, we tried to do something about it. And the thing that came up every year, year after year, was the overcrowding in the building. Too many students, the classes were too big. This is the problem. Small classes, attention to the individual. It doesn't matter how many students are in the building.
You make it sound very simple, Larry.
It is very simple, but it costs a lot.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
And especially in these times now, these economic times, this is a troubled country as far as money. So what are we going to do in the end, and what are we going to do about the good ideas you have when there's not the money to support it?
Well, I don't know.
Can good teachers find some kind of a balance in between?
We can do the best we can, and we can lower
I used to teach for many years, and I remember not having that small a class, but I do remember maintaining control. I mean, I remember being pretty effective at maintaining control, and I taught math.
So
and
did
teaching.
I.
Oh, you taught math too?
Yes.
I don't know, maybe math's an easier topic, but I remember that I was able to do it. And I always thought the kind of things that you're talking about, enrichment, are some of the marks of a good qualified teacher.
Yes. I was successful also as a math teacher, but there were always the students on the fringe who had problems.
Well, I suppose when you're teaching a big class, that's what you do. You try to take care of everybody, but you deal with the bulk that you have in between.
Yes, and that's where intensive remediation
might help.
Like labs and things like that would help tremendously.
You wrote a very good letter, and it certainly was well spoken enough to get into the New York Times. So you certainly have some good points, and that's why we chose you on Getting Your Money's Worth.
Thank you.
I bet you were a very good teacher. I put my money on it.
I had my moments.
I think taxpayers got their money's worth out of you. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm Judith West. You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. Thanks for watching.